The team behind this $32 million market cap gold stock is the same one that founded Bema Gold, which sold for $3.1 billion in 2006, and B2 Gold, which currently sits at a $4.9 billion market cap. Welcome to Capital Catalyst. Today we're looking at BeMetals, a small cap gold stock from Japan that's really caught our attention. The team behind it is 2 for 2 when it comes to building multi-billion dollar gold companies, and this is their next venture. The legends that we're talking about are Clive Johnson, the CEO, Tom Garagan, the Senior Vice President of Exploration, and Roger Richer, who's the Executive Vice President. These big three behind B2 Gold and Bema Gold have now come together and are actively involved in the new BeMetals venture. Now taking a brief look into BeMetals, we can see that 1, they have several gold projects in Japan known as the Kazan portfolio. 2, they have the Pungeni copper project in Zambia. And 3, they're currently drilling and plan to do more with the additional funding they recently received from B2 Gold. They announced that they secured up to $5.3 million in funding from B2 Gold in a private placement consisting of $3.3 million in convertible debentures and an additional $2 million in funding. Now to where we see the most promise in the Kazan portfolio in Japan. This is a similar setup to Bema Gold and the Kupol deposit that they found in the early 2000s. The Kupol deposit was a sizable epithermal gold discovery, the same type of geology that's being explored in Japan right now. As some of you may know, Bema Gold started with a $34 million market cap. But through the discovery of their Kupol deposit and many other successful mining practices, they grew immensely and were acquired for $3.5 billion in 2007 by Kinross Gold. Now looking at BeMetals, which currently sits at a $30 million market cap, we know there could be potential for significant growth. For comparison, let's briefly examine the Hishikari mine near Kagoshima and proximal to BeMetals' Toshiro project. While the average gold head grade for mining operations is around 1 gram per ton, the Hishikari mine achieved an impressive 30 to 40 grams per ton. This find has already generated over 9 million ounces of gold today and is still operating, making it a substantial discovery. Now let's turn our attention to our main concern for BeMetals, which is their cash flow. The company is running on a continuous operating loss, which makes sense because it's still in the exploration phase, but the risk is still worth noting. However, the recent financing secured from B2 Gold gives us confidence in their financial position. Having a large company like that behind them should assure investors that even in economic downturns, BeMetals will be able to keep the lights on. But that's enough of our insight for now. We're hitting the street to interview BeMetals' VP of Investor Relations to learn more and see for ourselves if it's truly a buy for investors. All right, everyone, welcome to Capital Catalyst. Today we're joined by Derek Iwanaka, VP of Investor Relations for BeMetals. Derek, thanks so much for having us today.
Thanks for having me, Armand.
Yeah, so we've covered BeMetals before. We've spoken a little bit about the project, the location, the site, and one undeniably important factor is the team. Anyone familiar with BeMetals or has some knowledge of the legends in the mining space, they know the names Clive Johnson, Tom Garagan, Roger Richer, and their success stories with B2 and Bema. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about how valuable it is to have experience like that in the mining space, and specifically with BeMetals, how it's been a factor that has expedited your growth.
Yeah, it's huge. Having guys that have done it before, and in fact, not once, but twice before, makes a huge difference in this business. Because as an investor, a lot of people are worried about investing in somebody who's never done it before, or they're new to the game or new to the business. In this case, and that's a big reason why I joined the team, was actually coming back to the same group that I had started my whole career with. So back 20 years ago, when I started in my career, I started with these exact same people, and knowing that they have done it before made a huge difference for my confidence, but also I think for investors that are looking at possibly investing. You look at somebody who's done it before, you look at their track record. And so these guys have literally made multi-billion dollar companies twice, and hopefully we're going to make it a third time.
Looking a little at Bema and B2 as well, Bema's first major gold discovery was in Chile. B2 Gold acquired the gold mines in Nicaragua. What did your team and those see in those first two projects that kind of synergized with your belief in BeMetals? And is there anything similar or different, a new opportunity that you see with these new mines with BeMetals in Japan now?
So I guess if you look back at Bema in particular, they made a large epithermal gold discovery in Russia. That wasn't their first discovery, but that was probably their most important discovery, and that's eventually what got the company bought out by Kinross back in 2007. So that was a $3.5 billion acquisition, and it was mostly, I would say, because of the Kupol project, which was in Russia. Now, in Japan, it's very similar geology. It's a epithermal vein system that we're looking at here. And there's a lot of, I guess, analogies or similarities between these projects here and what we saw in Russia. So that, where I think we're using some of that history and education or experience that we got, using that for exploration here in Japan. So that, I think, is a big head start that we have above other teams that might be exploring in Japan, because we aren't the only ones over here. But we at least have that experience of looking at epithermal vein systems and exploring and having a discovery success. And not many people can actually boast that they've actually made a discovery. You may have studied it in textbook or you visited some sites, but few people have actually made multi-million ounce discoveries, and our team has.
That hands-on experience can't replace that. Yeah.
Tough to, yes.
Yeah. Just going back to B2 and Bema a little more, you actually recently announced that you guys secured $5.3 million in funding from B2 Gold. And in the news release, the CEO, John Wilton, said that along with the continued drilling at the Kazan gold projects and your copper project in Zambia, you also plan to commence drilling at the Todoroki gold silver project in Japan at the end of this month.
Correct.
I was wondering what results you kind of foresee or expect to see with the ongoing drill projects, and why should investors be excited about the diversification BeMetals has kind of entered with that Japanese project as well?
Okay. Well, in the Kazan project, so that includes five projects throughout Japan. One of which we're drilling right now, which is the Kato project. That should be wrapping up, I think, later this month. So we'll be finishing up the program there. That's about 2,500 to 3,000 meters of drilling. We'll wrap that up this month, and then we'll shift at least one rig over to the Todoroki property. So that should be starting up later this month. What can we expect? I mean, I can't say what the results are going to be, but I mean, like I said, we've had the experience of exploring these types of deposits. We've been hitting gold so far at our Kato property. We haven't, I would say, made a full-blown discovery, but certainly we've had some really good encouragement, and hopefully we're going to see more of those types of results here in the coming months. Todoroki, that's brand new for us to be exploring. We've never put a hole in that thing. It really hasn't been mined since the early 80s, and even then it was, I would say, fairly old school type of mining. So it really hasn't seen modern techniques of exploration, and it was a past mining operation. So we know that when they stopped mining, it wasn't because they ran out of gold. It was actually more because of economics. And at that time, the Japanese yen was very strong. The US dollar was also fairly strong, and the gold price was quite low. And so it wasn't stopped because it ran out of gold. It stopped just because of economics. So we think there's a really good chance there that we're going to be able to extend all the veins that were there at Todoroki. So that's going to be really exciting to see what the exploration results come.
Good indications for sure.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I just want to shift gears a little bit and talk about kind of the current and foreseeable macro market and how it's affecting the price of gold. So we know, many of us know, gold's broken that $2,000 benchmark quite a few times, but it can't really sustain that price. It seems to always drop. I was wondering if you had any insight or foresight on the gold price and what the factors are that are kind of holding it back from that permanent breakthrough to push it past that $2,000 benchmark for the foreseeable future.
Well, I wish I had the foresight, but
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't be here if I had that kind of foresight. But in terms of insights, I mean, I have a fair bit of experience watching the gold price and some of the factors that have an influence on the gold price. So certainly the US dollar is a huge part of what drives the gold price. And that's kind of been fluctuating. The US dollar has been fairly strong in the last couple of years. But it's hard to say whether or not that's going to sustain itself. I mean, there's a lot of influences going towards other currencies, Chinese currency in particular. And of course, cryptos are always somewhere around there. So, I guess we'll have to see what happens with the US dollar. But another thing, of course, is what everybody's looking at is the interest rates and what's going to happen with the interest rates, because that also has a big impact on what happens with, I guess, liquidity in general. And that will have an impact on the gold price. And so, unfortunately, the last year, I guess, and a half has been rising interest rates, which has had an inverse relation with the US dollar, which has made it stronger, and that has made the gold price a little bit weaker. I suspect that you're probably going to have to see at least a leveling off of the interest rates, and that will hopefully kind of steady the markets, and then you start to see some liquidity come back. But probably you'll see a more meaningful increase when you actually see some either interest rate decreases, and then you start to see the US dollar start to shrink down. So hopefully that's going to be the case. It seems to be heading in that direction. I mean, the inflation is at least coming close to under control and getting close to that 2% target rate. So if we see that, I think you should see the gold price start to creep up again and hopefully breach that 2,000 mark and stay there. That's the main thing. It's like you said, it's breached there a couple of times, but it hasn't really sustained itself, and that's what we need to see. And I think that will be a really big indicator for investors in general, because if you can see some stability, I think that's going to reassure people that, you know, this gold price is here to stay, and that you can see more of investments coming in.
So BeMetals recently started exploration on a project in the south of Japan in close proximity to the Hishikari gold mine, which is historically known as a high yield gold mine in Japan. I was wondering what the benefits are of being in such close proximity to Hishikari, and if you see any indicators currently in that project.
Okay, so the average grade for mining across the world, this is underground and open pit, is about 1 gram per ton. Okay. And Hishikari is operating at 30 to 40 grams per ton. So it blows away anything that's average, and it's the highest. As far as I know, it's the highest grade gold mine operating today, and it's already produced over 8 million ounces of gold. So it's super high grade. It's still operating. One of our projects is close to Hishikari. The other two that we're drilling are not that close. It does have similar geology, so you can draw some comparisons, but it's not like within a couple hundred kilometers.
Is that the one in the south of Japan?
Yeah, so
okay.
It's in the far south.
Okay.
So we see some similarities between the two. Like we see the quartz, which is really important. If you have quartz and you have the gold in that quartz, that's a big plus for us, because what happens is you potentially can ship that ore directly to a smelter. They use that quartz, which has silica in it, as flux. So that basically breaks down the slag, and then you get paid out for the gold. There's really big benefits out of that, because one is you don't have to build like your typical mine. Like you don't need a big mill. You don't need like tailings. You don't have all that, potential environmental liabilities, because you're just basically taking ore out of the mine and you just truck it over and ship it to the smelter, and they deal with it. So that makes it way easier in terms of environmental permitting. It's just safer in general, and it should please, I would say, like anybody who's resistant to, say, mining, because you're going to have dangerous chemicals or explosives, that kind of stuff. You basically mitigate a lot of those fears by having that process. We don't know, it's still too early to say if we can actually use that process, but that's what they use at Hishikari.
Okay.
So Hishikari, I don't have a picture on hand, but like if you looked at it, you wouldn't think that that's a multi-billion-dollar business. It looks like a factory. Like it's pretty much like a warehouse. It's not very big, and it produces a shitload of money. So That's why everybody loves it, because it's small. People who drive by it don't even know that's a gold mine, because that's how small it is. So it's one of those, beautiful things. It is a bit of a unicorn. Like there's very few that are that high grade that you can mine like that. But we have the same kind of quartz, same kind of silica. What we were lacking right now is the gold. So we need more gold within that quartz. So that's what we're trying to find.
So you mentioned it's smaller and you're in a similar region.
Yes.
Because of its high yield, do you think it has lower operating costs? And
that too.
Would you experience something like that as well?
Yeah. Well, that's the idea, is you'd have lower capital costs, you'd have lower operating costs, and then of course lower environmental liability. So I mean, it's a win-win-win in any way you look at it from a mining perspective. So that's why we want to emulate something like that.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that we're going to find another Hishikari, but even if we found like a little brother or a little sister, I'd be super happy. If you're even close to that, you'd be happy. Mm-hmm. Like right now, we'd be happy with probably a 10 gram per ton mine. But if we found a 20 gram per ton, hey, geez, that'd be amazing. So,
amazing. Yeah.
So that's the idea, is we're trying to find something similar to that. And it doesn't have to be a Zach replica, but even if it's, you know, a tenth of the size or the 10th of the grade, it'd still be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It actually started at 80 grams per ton, which is like phenomenal.
Hishikari did?
Yeah.
What's the time?
So it started in the 80s, and
Okay.
then it's been mining now for 38 years, and still operating between 20 to 30 grams per ton. So it's still high grade, just not as high as it used to be.
And when did BeMetals open their mine in that same kind of region as Hishikari?
So that's just at exploration. So it's not a mine right now, but it's just at the exploration stage. So we started exploring there from last year, and we're going to try to get to Shiro, which is one of our properties in the south that's not too far from Hishikari. That probably won't be drilled until late this year or early next year. And then, you know, results, depending on when we get started, would be sometime like in the spring, probably.
So really early stage.
Yeah, it's
lots
still
of
pretty
good
early.
signs around there.
Yep. It has the right signs, right indicators, but we have to get in there and start drilling to see if it actually has the goods. Of course. Yeah.
What do you think right now for investors the number one concern is regarding BeMetals, and how is your team addressing that and looking to continue to address that moving forward?
Okay, maybe not just for us, but for the entire junior kind of, I think, mining sector is liquidity and finding capital right now. Because, I mean, we're in a nice office right now, but there's a lot of companies that are kind of struggling just to keep their lights on. So that's a huge thing in I think in this market, is being able to raise capital. And fortunately, we have B2 Gold that's backing us, and the guys behind B2 Gold as well. So we have huge financial support as well as technical support and other support. So that's, I think, really critical in this sector to be able to keep your lights on. Not only keep your lights on, but for us, keep our drills turning. Because if the drills aren't turning, you can't deliver on any catalysts. So we were able to actually, through this whole bad market, we've been able to keep the drills turning and have money left in the bank to keep on going. So I think that's pretty important in this, at least in this sector, and especially in like this cycle or this part of the cycle right now.
For sure. We just have one more question for you. BeMetals is up over 50% in the last 3 months. We just mentioned they secured over $5 million in financing, and it's just recently reached its 52-week high. Some would say this is one of the best positions BeMetals has been in the past few months, if not the last year. And I was wondering why you think the sentiment is changing and what investors and shareholders can look for in this BeMetals stock for the rest of 2023.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have been doing a bit more marketing, but there's been a good reason for that. A lot of that is because we've been drilling both in Japan and in Zambia now. We should start to see drilling results. So we should have catalysts coming up, which should hopefully drive the share price higher, assuming we get better results as we keep on going. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to is getting drill results out from both Japan and Zambia. And then we're always also on the hunt for other new projects. So if we come across either something that might be more advanced stage that we can get into production sooner than these exploration properties, that's something that we'll look at as well. So, we have, I'd say, multiple catalysts or potential catalysts. You have either exploration from both Japan and Zambia, but also with new projects.
BeMetals, ticker BMET. Thank you so much, Derek. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.